Show. So welcome. This is the NCRA's Zero Waste Advocacy Committee. We meet the second Tuesday of every month at 5:30 p.m., preceded by cocktails and sharing at 5. We always start on time. So I was watching Saturday Night Live and saw that Kim Kardashian claimed that she has 300 million Instagram followers. And so we need you to tell your friends and like-minded people to join us, because we've tasked Bonnie, who is our social media director, with sort of making up the ground between us and Kim. And to me, it seems like we have more important things to say than she does. So that's our goal, is to get to where she is. We're not quite there yet, but we're trying. So each month we pick a topic that has sort of a hot, interesting topic in the area of resource recovery. We couple it with a reading from the Recycling Archives, which is a series of oral histories recorded by Dan Knapp and others with people who we consider to be the pioneers of the recycling movement. And in past months, we've done 2 composting giants, Will Bax of Sonoma Compost and Brenda Platt of the Washington, D.C. Institute for Local Self-Reliance. So tonight, we don't have anybody like them, but we're going to do a reading from the late Tanya Levy, who was best known as one of the early people to come out against incinerators, people who wanted to burn garbage and make energy from them, which was a very popular thing in the 70s and 80s, popular with local governments, popular with waste haulers that wanted to build it, popular with people who wanted to finance them. And she was instrumental in stopping them. She also, was kind of a down-to-earth person. And tonight's show is going to be on how soil health relates to climate change. And so it seemed appropriate to share some of Tanya's words. And I'm going to start with that tonight before we go to the soil health part of the show. And Susan Kinsella, who is the director of the Recycling Archives, is going to read from some things that Tanya said. And she's going to talk a little bit about the Recycling Archives. And go ahead, Susan.
Great. I just want to make sure, is my sound okay before I start talking?
Good for me.
Okay, cool. Well, the Recycling Archives are about wanting to be able to record interviews with people who have done important things to advance recycling in a lot of different ways. Some from the very beginning of the modern recycling time in the 1970s, around when they got inspired by Earth Day, and some that have done a lot of work since then as well. And I always find it really fascinating to talk with people. A lot of them are people I've known for decades. And yet when we talk, when I do interviews with them, I find they tell me stories I've never heard before. So I want to tell you a couple stories from Tanya tonight, from her interview. She was interviewed by Gary Liss. And John had said that he wanted to focus on someone who was a recycling activist. And there's a lot of people that would fit that description, but I chose Tanya Levy for this one because she's got some incredible stories about how she brilliantly made change happen in situations in which it had seemed impossible. So there's 2 stories I want to tell you. This first one is from around 1977, when she worked for Garbage Reincarnation in Sonoma County, which was a small but fast-growing nonprofit recycling company that was founded and run by Mike Anderson. And these are Tanya's words. You may ask, how long did it take me to get into the field once I found it? Well, it was about 24 hours. Advocacy turned into my paid work. I read an article from about a garbage to energy plant being proposed for a 4-county area north of San Francisco. Our county, Sonoma, was the center of that cluster, so I thought it was likely that it would be built and operated near where I was living. This incinerator was the first waste to energy proposal that had been funded from the California Waste Board, so a lot was riding on it. But when I read through its pages, it looked wrong to me. It looked like they were leaving things out of the analysis. So that's how I found my apprenticeship. I went down to the recycling center, which for her was garbage reincarnation, to find out what they knew about this plan to burn garbage nearby. And I found that they already had a file cabinet full of information. I read and learned as much as I could, as fast as I could. Some of the staff at first suspected that I might be a spy for the garbage companies. I mean, here they were, already doing battle over wasting versus conservation. Then now comes this woman with all this enthusiasm. She goes through their files. She acts like she really cares. Where did this come from? She's laughing as she tells this. But I won them over. I baled enough cardboard for them. But there was a lot to cover, and before I got very far, I was already showing up at meetings. I drove to Mendocino County to make a comment to the electeds who were already favoring the burn plant project. I got a hitchhiker. I love this part of it. I got a hitchhiker to read more of the recycling center's material to me as we drove to the meeting. Then I gave a speech. To tell them about the technology they were approving. Mike Anderson asked me to write up a cost-benefit analysis analyzing what participating in this thing would really mean. The project was geographically big, sprawling really, and would likely have been very costly to operate. The consultant's plan was to take garbage from several coastal counties, Mendocino County, Sonoma, Solano, and Marin County, and truck all that garbage to Healdsburg, just off Highway 101. Mike sponsored me to write and publish the report, Garbage to Energy, the False Panacea. It was full of disturbing facts about burning garbage and heavily footnoted. I had time to find out the flaws of this one, and the ash soiling people's laundry at another one, and the explosion and the death. Things were clogging up the machinery because the infeed was diverse, unpredictably complex, mixed, unsorted garbage. I concluded that the plants were simply unable to take mixed garbage that changed every day and control the air pollution and control the flow. The burn plant companies were using off-the-shelf mining equipment that was built for a uniform feedstock like wheat and chaff or low sulfur coal or high sulfur coal or whatever, but certainly something predictable. This report became well known in the field just as the burn proponents were starting their campaigns all over the state of California. I think the first printing was out by 1978. And then Gary Liss, who's the interviewer, says, so within a year of starting a garbage reincarnation, you wrote that major critique on a competing discard handling technology. That critique was read by people all over the country. And for a decade afterwards, it was a key document, wasn't it? And Tanya answered him, yes, I got great help from an engineer. His work involved troubleshooting waste to energy plants. That was very helpful to me. Without giving me confidential information, he was willing to bend enough to confirm or critique the accuracy of what I had found. It was a great relief to have an engineer willing to tell me that what I was saying in public was accurate, because we really needed to tie things down that way. We wanted to tell the truth. When I did go to the Sonoma County Board of Supervisors, I noticed that one of them was asking the right questions. His name was Brian. He was tall and slender and really young. I saw that he had this list in front of him and he was going, well, Mr. Consultant who's making this presentation, you're telling us all the good things about this plant, but what about these bad things, A, B, C, and D? By the time they were finished with the consultant, the supervisors had decided that I was right. If the consultants were presenting just the positives and not the known risks and potential negatives, then the conclusions of their quote unquote study were foredrawn. Down the road, the county would be faced with the decision whether to go ahead with a flawed proposal after a lot of expensive work had already been done. How much staff time they would have had to put into it became an issue as well. Something in the package said, no staff time would be needed, but was that true? No. When you looked closely at the details, county staff were going to have to give the designers lots of information. They were going to have to meet with the burn plant vendors too and compare them and decide. So the Sonoma County supervisors eventually decided they wanted to give recycling a try before they went further into procuring a waste to energy plant for garbage. We killed the first waste-to-energy plant that was being planned for the state of California. And that one we killed was the same plant that I went up to Mendocino County to give a talk about. This was 1977. So that was a great victory for an activist working for a small private company. But Tanya proved that you could also make change from within government. The second story about how Tanya helped create market pull through legislative action is from when she worked at the state of California's Department of Conservation, and it takes place around 1989. So back to Tanya, she says, I attended a conference of paper recyclers in Sacramento. The problem was that used newsprint prices were too low. In some cases, newsprint was actually being buried to enhance the market by cutting supply. Garden State Paper's executives, Garden State was a paper mill in Southern California that made recycled newsprint. Their executives were talking about setting a minimum recycled content requirement for paper. Their idea was that this would enhance the market. And that was the first element of my involvement in what was then known in the legislature as AB 2020. Element number 2 happened when I heard Trish Ferrand telling about an equipment supplier who had been at a meeting where USA Today said they were not going to buy any recycled paper at all, ever. Number 3 was that USA Today had just started publishing. Their big selling point was color in the newspaper. They thought they needed a higher quality paper, and there wasn't any recycled newsprint that would meet their requirements. And since newspapers compete for advertising dollars, no newspaper publishers would be able to use recycled content paper and still get advertising money. The fourth thing was that the paper industry had just completed a 10-year cycle of investment and capacity. So they already had all the capacity they thought they would need for the next 6, 7, or 8 years, and they had no incentive to put in new recycling capacity. So it looked to us like these ingredients were combining to kill newspaper recycling. And yet AB 939, which was also big legislation at that point, was going to increase newsprint collection, which was already struggling to handle the volumes it was taking. So here's the problem. Let's go back to function as we try to come up with an answer. Do newspapers need color advertising? No, that has nothing to do with the function of a newspaper. Californians Against Waste called a meeting of all sorts of people to suggest legislative ideas. I attended and got up to present this issue and the idea of increasing demand for recycled content paper. An aide to Senator Delane Easton was in the audience listening. 1 month later, a draft minimum content recycling bill was circulating at the Department of Conservation, which we called DOC, from Senator Easton's office. DOC was proposed to administer this bill, so it was up to us staffers to analyze the financial impacts and formulate our opinion of whether it would work and what we'd have to do if it did work. Over a few years, the mandate would rise to 40% recycled content if it matched the quality and price of the competition. Now, I was not officially analyzing legislation. I was not supposed to, but I found out who in DOC was analyzing the bill. It was Pat Schiavo. At the DOC, people on different floors didn't talk to people on other floors as much as they talked with the people on their own floor. But I went up and down. So I went into his floor to talk to Pat, and I said, Pat, there's this bill, and we have some ideas. What are you going to do with it? And Pat says, oh my God, I don't have time to deal with that. Besides, I don't think it'll work. So I'm going to just say, let's do a study first. So I went, Pat, here's A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. And I said, do you want me to analyze the bill? Well, I wasn't allowed to do it, but I was on the phone a lot with the legislative aide. They would call me and say, the Small Printers Association is worried about this, and the Large Printers Association is worried about that. And I was right out of garbage reincarnation and used to dealing with the paper industry directly. So I called these people up and talked to them, and I got their concerns dealt with. Pat Schiavo got on board and became a supporter. We brought the minimum content bill in for under $200,000 a year in administrative costs. We said the industry already had the information that we needed to make the cost determination and do comparative analysis. So the bill didn't have to go into suspense for the budget, and we avoided the suspense committee, which is a really big deal in California legislative process, because things sit there until you decide you really do have the money to prioritize them and make them happen. And the minimum content bill passed and became law. So then what happened was this. 2 years later, the paper recycling capacity in North America had doubled. The volume being recycled was twice as much, because in order to sell paper into California, you had to have 40% recycled content. Having minimum recycled content as an industry mandate took away the risk of making recycled paper, because you know somebody's going to buy it. You know that USA Today is not going to knock you out of the water by refusing to use recycled content paper. So we used regulation to make a level playing field. That was my first brilliant flash. This is why you recycle. And that's my favorite thing in my life, I'll tell you. Now, I just want to give you this little bit of insight into her work. Tanya's success might have been foreordained. Earlier in her interview, she had said, and here's Tanya again, "My dad got his first heart attack when I was 2. He died when I was 12. Confronted by his own mortality, he announced me as a new light heavyweight fighter for a better world. He told me that he assumed when I was in the womb that we had a deal. Making a better world was what I would do with my life. But he died too soon and never got around to teaching me how." So then Tanya goes on to say that she felt that Mike Anderson, during the time she worked at Garbage Reincarnation, took on her dad's job of teaching her exactly that, how to be that light heavyweight fighter. And I think it's fair to say that even though her dad didn't get to see it, she did her dad proud as a fighter for a better world that he had known she would be even before she was born.
Thank you.
John, you're on mute.
I love this interview. It's one of many, and there's many like it, but this one is very, very special. Tanya was a bright light in the recycling firmament.
So I wanted to read one section because I think it has to do with what we're talking about tonight. And it's entitled, "I Wasn't Squeamish." And she's talking about when she worked on a ranch in Mendocino County. She says, "When I had the ranch, we got to use some forms for making a compost privy out of concrete. We used those forms to make and install our very first compost privy, which of course we used. Then we went around the ranch making a compost privy for each of the households. After that, one of my jobs was to take off the plywood door and use a pitchfork to turn the composting organics into the next bin. I was also recording the temperatures of the humanure compost for the state's Office of Appropriate Technology. I thought it was fine to be doing that research. I wasn't squeamish about it. I saw that the recycling vision was not limited to just getting things out of the landfill or picking up litter. Its real identity flashed in front of me with all of its pieces in order. I thought, recycling's many applications provide multiple pressure points to change the way that industry looks at resources. We were looking to change the way that industry uses resources to manufacture things." So with that, I'll turn to our show tonight, which is about soil health and climate change. And
can I say one quick thing?
Sure.
Hi. I'm sorry to butt in. I just want to acknowledge that was a great read. Also, for Bay Area Green Tour, we brought students and seniors and people down to the Berkeley transfer station and remember Tanya, and just want to acknowledge how gracious she was and inspiring. So thank you for sharing that.
Thank you, Marissa. So tonight we're going to talk about soil health and climate change and how those two things are connected. And we have three prominent speakers to talk about that. We have Johnathan DeLong of the City of Alameda's REAP Center. We have Ann Freiwald of Bay Area Green Tours, and we have Kourtnii Brand of the California Alliance for Community Composting, among many things. So I'm going to start with Johnathan because I asked him in advance to answer a difficult question. And before I ask him that question, I'm going to ask him to tell us about the REAP Center.
Sure. So the REAP Center is emerging. You know, we formed January of 2021, so we've been around for about 10 months now. And we are a nonprofit focused on biodiversity and soil. And for us, that's important because there's a lot of things that roll up from biodiversity and soil. So I'll touch on those in more detail as I think address the question John's about to ask me. But ultimately what we are structurally, our physical site, it's a half-mile long stretch of land. It's old railroad land. It's about 100 feet wide, half-mile long. And we are telling the story of biodiversity and soil by putting in an edible park and sculpture garden. We hope to be a lot like the Exploratorium, but with a focus on microbes. And so our soil lab section is intended to have a bit of a whimsical feel to it with things like a worm world and a fermentation station and a fungi hut and a biome boutique and a microbe mine. I get carried away with alliteration and all things. But ultimately we want to contextualize what's going on, you know, below the ground for people to help them understand the importance of the biodiversity in soil and where it can go. In addition to those two elements, there's also a permaculture community garden that's going in. And the reason we like that is because regular community gardens are, you know, here's Bob's cucumbers and Sally's tomatoes in these separate boxes, and that's not how nature works. And so the idea of interdependent and interconnected ecosystems also tells a really important story and teaches lessons on how do we get along with each other. And then really the major part of the facility is a makerspace. And that's intended to help incubate and accelerate people working on art, science, technology, and policy related to biodiversity and soil. And biodiversity and soil for us rolls up to three main tenets, which is carbon sequestration at scale, especially if you look at it in relationship to the policies that municipalities enforce and big ag. It also rolls up to enhanced nutrition for humans. The healthier the soil, the healthier the things that we eat coming out of that soil, full stop. And then one thing I think is kind of fun is the anaerobic renewable energy generation that can come from the compost itself, both through direct heat and also through gas. And then if you want to weave in biochar, you know, you can actually generate energy from the biochar creation. And that's an important element in the composting as well, if you include that. So that's a mouthful. Hopefully that gives you an idea what we're up to. But we've been around for, you know, 10 months and we're running fast and hard. We've had hundreds of volunteers. We've raised some real money and things are coming together. So be careful what you wish for kind of project. We might just actually have to do the stuff we talk about.
Well, that sounds exciting. When you say that it's designed to be kind of like an exploratorium, is it intended to be a sort of a kid destination? You know, it's Saturday and you got to take your 5-year-old somewhere to get him out of the house and let's go to the REAP Center. Is it that kind of thing?
Yeah, it is that kind of thing, with the exception of where you have the intersection of the makerspace, which is really intended to have a youth through PhD level incubator. And so our hope is to pair, you know, young minds with formally educated minds or people out there actually doing the work. I mean, I'm not going to lie, I teared up the other day when I looked out at one of the volunteer nights, and there's these two PhD engineers, one from MIT, one from Stanford, working with these kids that are getting their community service hours from Alameda High School. And to be straight with you, like, we haven't even done any outreach yet. I'm not even sure how that happened. So bringing people together and also answering the cry from a lot of youth out there who are going to lead the way in the future in this, that might feel there's a urgency, that they want to wait, you know, 8 or 12 years for higher education to then maybe start at an entry-level position to maybe then affect things for climate change. There's a lot of young people who want to get their hands dirty right now. And so we hope to have, you know, pair those different disciplines together.
That sounds exciting. So the hard question I asked you, which was the theme of the show is going from soil health to climate change. And we've talked in previous months about saving the world with compost. Can you, because it sets up what I want to talk to the other speakers about, can you give us a step-by-step of how we go from having healthy soil to having climate change?
Yeah, I mean, I think if I had to summarize it in one word, it's scale, right? And you know, the nutritional bank account we have on Earth is soil. But if we look at converting ag practices that are traditionally, you know, monoculture tilled land that's, you know, killing the soil. It's turning soil into dirt. What we're doing is we're missing the opportunity to capture carbon at scale, gigaton level carbon sequestration. There's some studies that show that if we convert just 80% of the farmland globally, now that's a gigantic number, but 80% of the, you know, ag land globally to permaculture practices, no-till practices, that we can take as much carbon out of the air that we have put in ever as a species. And we can do that in a generation and a half. And so one thing I like about soil as a solution is it's one of those places you can find optimism within calamity, right? You know, there's a lot bearing down upon us. But it's things that we can affect at scale, and I think that we can do that if you look at Buckminster Fuller talking about trim tabs as, you know, what are the little things we can change to affect, you know, great change. I have a policy background. I'll spare you all of my details from the past working with affordable housing and other things, but I like looking at what are those little levers we can pull, and what is the intersectionality between, you know, data and technology and biomimicry and earth's practices, where we can use soil as the lever that we pull by making some small decisions related to, say, policy, right? Right now, you look at subsidy streams that are being distributed to ag that are aiming for the wrong metrics, right? We're paying out subsidy based on the weight yield of crops, right? But the weight yield is irrelevant, right? That was an approximation before we could fully at scale understand the nutritional yield of crops. But now that we have partners like the Bionutrient Food Association out of the Bionutrient Institute that has developed a handheld spectrometer where you can walk into a store and hold it up to a carrot and tell the nutritional yield of one carrot versus the other, now agronomers and buyers of ag products can actually be rewarding the output based on the metric that matters the most, and that's the nutritional yield. And why am I talking about that? Well, that becomes a small trim tab. The only way to get to that higher nutritional yield is through healthy soil practices. And along the way of the healthy soil practices, aiming for the nutritional yield that helps, you know, the most amount of people, we have the ability to capture carbon at scale. And in fact, the only way to get to those healthier nutritional yields is through healthy soil practices. And the result of those is carbon sequestration. So there's a lot of work being done related to, you know, how do we actually get to, you know, zero carbon output. But this is an element that we can look at for carbon capture. Bit of a mouthful. Is that, you know, the direction you want to go? Because I can keep on rolling.
So I wonder, it seems like if you ask most people on the street, would you like to help climate change by drawing carbon out of the air? They would say, yeah, that sounds like a great idea. And here you have a great idea to do it. So why are the policymakers not doing it? What's the impediment?
Oh gosh.
What are the many impediments?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot. That's probably a longer conversation that we actually entirely have time for. But I guess I should say it's a matter of will, right? You know, all that is now, you know, once wasn't. You know, we have willed all the things we have around us into existence. You know, whether it's social structures or broken systems or infrastructure or policies, right? We have made a choice to have these things one way or another. Some have crept in, you know, some were well-intended, and now we can look back and see where they aren't serving us now. But I think it's a matter of not rewarding bad behavior and looking at the intersection of financial policy and practices and disclosures that are coming right now. The impediment so far has been us as a species or a society being able to hide behind the idea of externalities, right? If you look at economics, right? The idea that human health and planetary health are just too complex to figure out. Like, so we'll just put them aside and we'll not actually assign, you know, harm or a line item for those things. So I think seeing financial disclosures, which we are seeing now today, come into view, where there's climate-related financial disclosures that are occurring through the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures, where now asset managers are reporting their effect on carbon. And we see the Task Force on Nature-Related Financial Disclosures, where asset managers are reporting their effect on biodiversity. We're seeing the reduction of externalities as something we can hide behind. So now major asset managers, in fact, 54 trillion with a T of assets under management globally, are now running 3 sets of books. One is their traditional books for conventional capital, right? How do they report for their financials? The other is, what is their effect on carbon? What is their carbon related risk? And the other is, what is their biodiversity related risk? And just a quick summary of that, it's like if you're a bank financing a railroad that's being built into the Amazon whose sole purpose is to remove lumber, you have to disclose that biodiversity risk. And so bringing that into, you know, our space, which is big ag in relation to biodiversity and soil, now you're going to see producers of synthetics that are used to amend soil for some of these conventional monocrop practices having to disclose their relationship to the biodiversity risk they pose. That's all financial markets and globally. So I think supporting those is how we move forward.
Okay, so I'm gonna segue then to Anne, because it sounds like from what Johnathan is saying is when you're trying to change opinion, which we're trying to do, you have to shine a light on things that are bad and you have to shine a light on things that are good. And it sounds, I think Bay Area Green Tours tries to do that. So Anne, could you tell us what Bay Area Green Tours does and how that relates to making healthier soil and helping climate change?
Yes, great segue. So Marissa Lamagna is also on the phone, and I'll just say I've been with Bay Area Green Tours for about 3 years, and the whole mission for Bay Area Green Tours was, or is still, to create tours where we actually bring people from schools, from the tech industry, from financial institutions, whoever, and get them actually out on the land and actually out on the farms, to the businesses, meeting the practitioners and the individuals who are completely dedicated to regenerative and sustainable practices. Because when it really comes down to it, like, you know, Johnathan, I love where you're coming from. You're in a little bit of a different world, right? Where the impact that we're having, but we all need them to all need these strategies to be woven together. So Bay Area Green Tours is affecting climate change and through soil health by just really getting people to where they need to be to really smell the soil, to smell the compost. And I think also when you go out on the land, or even if we did virtual tours the last year and a half because we couldn't meet in person, even just being so inspired by the people who are dedicating their lives to regenerative and sustainable practices. And all of the people that we go and do our tours with, we did over the past year and a half, we did a virtual series called Solutionaries Speak. And I was able to interview several, I would say thought leaders in the area, even of climate change. We interviewed Donna Markegard, who was featured in Kiss the Ground, and went out to the Markegard family grass-fed, and she really spoke to, so it's Markegard family grass-fed, and they're this amazing business that talk about no waste. Everything is used, and they don't even bring in feed because they're taking care of thousands of acres of properties around the Bay Area and bringing back practices where, forget the term she prefers to use, but so rotational grazing or managed grazing, to really not only does it just recycle everything. I mean, we're talking the soil is doing better, grows the better plants, deeper roots because of the grazing. The animals eat the plants, make amazing, like incomparable tasting meat products if that's your thing. But even if it's not your thing, it's they're regenerative practices that she's using. And through the practices she's using, she's creating thousands of acres around the Bay Area that are where the soil is healthier and therefore the plants are healthier, and no doubt probably the water. So I can say that about Bay Area Green Tours. And I just want to chime in that, Bay Area Green Tours is one passion of mine that I share with Marissa and the wonderful team we have there. But I also have a business called Vital Cycles, creating planetary and personal resilience. And Marissa actually wanted me to make sure I mention it. And I do this with my partner, Lydia Nielsen, and we do permaculture and human ecology education around the Bay Area, and have partners up in Solano County with Sustainable Solano, and working in San Jose with Smart Yards Education with Elizabeth Sarmiento, and our Live and Well here in Santa Cruz, and how we also deal with soil and climate changes. We just gave a talk on Saturday in Sassoon City about flood mitigation and how communities can start preparing for the floods that are going to be expected. And a big thing that we focused on was how can we create soil that can hold more water, right? Because if we're looking around, you know, just in this little part, this little town that we were working in, we found one huge parking lot. It's about 5 acres large, and just nothing, just parking, no permeable, no, not even water catchment really happening at all. And we figured that it's for 24-inch annual rainfall, just in this one shopping center, over 1 million gallons of water are actually being wasted. Free water falling from the sky, right? That we desperately need to get into the soil, not just for the soil microbes, not just to create healthier plants, but to create soil that can actually hold water and increase that holding capacity. So I just want to go back to the resource. I love when you sent me the email, John, this idea. So all the work that we do around permaculture it's looking at everything that's seen as waste, actually. And we're just sort of renaming it and actually making sure that it gets used. So not just water from our roof, right? But also from the shower, from our laundry machines, right? We're taking plants that are even weeds that are considered waste that people pull up and say, no, like leave the roots. We want, you know, that we want more biodiversity. So I can end it there. That was a lot more maybe than you asked, but I got excited about what Johnathan was talking about.
We like excitement. So both you and Johnathan talked about reaching out to children or kids and in your case, doing tours and seminars. And sometimes I think that's the best hope, because we see some marvelous advocacy by children in this field. But for you, trying to make change, do you do anything to try to target policymakers, decision makers, elected officials, get them in the room in Sassoon City to see why a soil bank with water would be better than a parking lot?
Oh yeah, that's being worked on. That's our partners with Sustainable Solano are doing that really, really good work.
How do you approach that? How do you get the?
Well, I mean, we're talking about Sassoon. I don't live there. I live here, but we partner with Sustainable Solano, and the mayor and the vice mayor are all really interested in figuring out how to help the community and what can be done on a community level. I mean, composting, Kourtnii, the work that you're doing, composting would be amazing, because again, then we create that organic matter that can be directly put onto these soils that are very clay-like or very sandy. They actually have a kind of an extreme. So again, using food to create soil instead of it going to landfill, it's just, right, doesn't it all seem so obvious sometimes? Why are we still having to beat ourselves over the head? And I will just say to you, John, I started my whole career in this path was at the Student Recycling Center in San Francisco State University in like 1988. And that was when we did a lot of policy work back then. And I've done a lot of policy work in the past. And now I'm really more of an educator, activist, practitioner. And I get my fingers into some policymakers when I can, when the opportunity arises.
So you said one thing I felt I have to come back to, which is I realized that during the pandemic we have to do things virtually, and it's not the best, but it's what we have to work with. And you said you want people to be able to smell the compost,
Yeah.
which I think is a great thing, because I like to smell the compost. I like having it in my hands. As a lawyer, presentation is an important thing. How do you make a presentation virtually to get people to smell the compost? What's the challenge? How do you overcome that challenge?
That's a great question. I mean, I think that you have someone who is an eloquent speaker, or if you have a kid, let me tell you, the best descriptions of the smell of a live compost pile have come from children or young adults, because they think it's going to be gross. And then they're like, oh, that smells like this, So, we did one virtual team building thing. It wasn't for compost, but it was how to have a kitchen garden. And we had our friend who was 6 years old, little boy, and just his commentary about the smell of the earth, the smell of the mint, the different, like he made it come alive, I think, for the people that couldn't be there right in that moment. And just for children as well, I just want to put a plug, because I also work at UC Santa Cruz and manage one of the gardens there. And that's like, the students are 18 to about 23 years old. And I can't tell you how it lit them up. And again, this kind of collapsed during COVID. Our composting system that we have at UC Santa Cruz, just at the Stevenson Garden, we were diverting 1 ton of food scraps per quarter every year with our compost, and then just turning it into soil. And the students were sifting and doing that and putting it right into the beds and using it. And that's like life-changing for young people. So as much as we can expose people, whether it's through Bay Area Green Tours or UC Berkeley or Kourtnii, I want you to really talk about your work, because I loved the videos that you shared with us. But really getting the young people, because the young people also need to know that they need to be able to question and be curious about the information they're getting on a regular basis, because that's actually where it all goes unraveled. Right? It's not intuitive what we're learning about how soil works, how the water cycle works, how plants work, right? So, yeah.
That gives me the segue into Kourtnii.
Yeah.
I think. So in past months, we've talked about what I would call the sociology of recycling. Partly we talk about it because Dr. Knapp here has a PhD in sociology, but he makes a compelling case that an important part of this system of resource recovery is touching things and interacting with people who touch things, which has been made much more difficult during the pandemic. But yet it seems like the connection between soil health to climate change somehow has to involve connectivity in the community. And Kourtnii, that's what you do. So tell us about how community composting connects people and how that provides the adhesive for putting these things together.
Yeah, thanks, John. And I'm going to do this from my hat with the California Alliance for Community Composting, but I want to just at least add my perspective of my perspective from Common Compost. So I started out in 2014 trying to start a community compost cooperative in Alameda County, and obviously hit some policy roadblocks and found out that I wasn't the only one who had an idea like this, and also hitting these policy roadblocks. So my first kind of answer to that question is find out your own community who's doing the same exact things as you are. And no matter what kind of challenges that you're dealing with, that's going to be your base community for sure. So for us, that turned out to be the Sustainable Economies Law Center, based out of Oakland, who's doing a lot of policy advocacy at the state level for SB 1383, the piece of legislation coming down the pipeline about keeping organics out of landfill. So we really wanted to make sure that, in a way, that was not just focused on what we call large size instead of large scale, and I'll come back to why we're talking about it that way in a second. Large size facilities, as in a one-size-fits-all solution for a lot of municipal programs coming down, whereas a decentralized network of community composting hubs could serve a significant amount of capacity, even though their size in individual ways would be small. And the only way to do that was to meet a lot of people who would want to do composting at the community level. So we've really developed the California Alliance for Community Composting since 2017 to do that interconnected in that networking. And also to respond to funding that was dedicated by CalRecycle to community scale activities in this sphere. And it's the first grant of its size, or the first grant that's ever come from the state of California to kind of invest in this solution to figure out methodologies that work at a community level to help us do this real resource recovery work that we're all talking about. So, you know, given the unstoppable power of yes from the state of California, $1.5 million, we were able to really go out and then solicit applications from community-based organizations who may not be entities, they may be unincorporated alliances, they may just be community gardens, school groups. We have watershed councils all across the board who are really interested in providing a hub and a source for their communities where they can bring materials, they can resource, recycle them into great compost and put them back there into their same communities. So primarily for us, it was having one to begin the discussion of when does waste become waste, right? That we're dealing in resources, but then also that the community asset and community ownership of these programs is where we're seeing real ability to scale, and not just providing, say, a corporate or a for-profit entity formation for managing these resources. So community being also very ownership-based. Happy to follow up on any of that.
Can you describe a sample community that you're talking about? Like how large geographically, population, where they are, what's the infrastructure within it?
Sure. So with the Cal Recycle grant, we've split up the state of California into 6 priority regions, and we're mainly focused on underserved communities within those regions. So that's our focus in this. Within that, regions are determined by counties and also watersheds. So we're following the soil and the water with how we also determine community. So in our area in Northern California, we've got the Bay Area, we have Sacramento, we have Butte County, and then we have Northern California tribal lands. So that's how we've kind of submitted where the need was the greatest and where there was also community willing to do this work. And then the sites within those certain counties, how they would work together to not only access all feedstock materials, but to provide capacity for those counties. So a sample community, like right now in the Inland Empire, looks at everywhere from Pomona all the way through to Joshua Tree. And it will provide 39 sites, I believe, that are basically going to be located at community gardens, but they would service residents who live anywhere in those counties as a place that they can come to donate their materials and drop it off. So we're static, and people are anywhere, but if you can find us, then you can come to us and bring us material from any place, and we'll be your community.
So the main connection sounds like is there would be a community drop-off center where people can come and self-haul their food scraps and yard debris and drop them off. Is that how it works?
Well, it's not just self-haul. We try to stay away from the word haul just in general because that innately thinks that we're using waste materials, whereas this is people's personal property and they want to donate it as incoming input to create a new product. And that transportation can happen in many ways. It can happen on bicycles by people providing services. It could be the generator walking it down to a community compost hub. But in any form that it is, yes, we are the hub who is resource recycling. People can bring us that material. And what is the basis of us is that it's not just about a profit margin to run these sort of services, but there's also a stakeholder versus shareholder benefit access on it as well, where we are looking specifically to provide benefits for the stakeholders, which is the community, the soil, and the environment, and not the shareholders, to generate profits and revenue that can then be recycled back into other business growth and development. So I think that's what sets us apart, not how the material gets to us, what we do with it, or how we process it, but specifically where we're putting those assets back into the community.
So part of what the Alliance does is put together essentially a network of these community centers of which it sounds like the REAP Center would be a candidate for.
Absolutely. And sorry, Jonathan, you missed our first call for applications, but I'll let you know at the second call for them, you would be an excellent candidate. So we started out in policy advocacy. First, we had to get the state's attention, and we had to become our own entity in order to apply for this request for assistance to run this grant program. And now we have really found our niche, which is in creating soil stewardship training curriculum programs to help community really learn how to do this. Providing social entrepreneurship help with building out small-scale enterprise to actually be able to answer this call and create this capacity. And then thirdly, it's creating the sites themselves. So we are also in education and advocacy and operations, but really our focus is in defining this as a legitimate solution to our not only food waste crisis, but our climate change resiliency needs.
And it sounds like your training videos are part of that process, and you've got 22 of them on YouTube. I haven't read them or watched them. I think they'd have to be on Netflix for me to watch 22 of them. But is that part of the education and outreach then?
Absolutely. That soil stewardship training was to train our site operators, which are specifically part of Community Composting for Green Spaces grant program by CalRecycle. But that is our asset now, our largest asset. And we really would like to run this soil summer camp, we affectionately started calling it, in years to come, and open it up to allow it to be no cost support to anybody to attend it. So yeah, and that's why we've made it available free on the internet on YouTube, so that anybody anywhere in the world could go and watch it for free.
So Anne, your company has a YouTube video that highlights wasted food recovery. I'm using the wrong term, but how does and NCRA has done a lot with trying to recover food. Where does that fit into the soil health to climate change equation?
Which piece? The taking the wasted food?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, and I think, you know, Kourtnii just spoke to this a lot as well, but I think that every, again, we're talking about, you know, waste and resources, right? So food waste, such a crazy thing. It's just the food we did not eat, right? So, and we know that if we just put it in the trash, then it goes to landfill, it can start emitting methane, which is even just as powerful as the carbon dioxide, that we really don't want to have that happen. So again, we're taking this resource of food that we didn't quite eat in time or whatever, and then we are transforming it into soil that we can use right away. And I'll just share a little personal story. My daughters are teenagers, they're awesome. But composting was just, they were like, oh, So I said, you know, and we always have composted. And so I just put a new sign on the bucket for a while that said future soil, right? And so we just talked about how this is future soil, yeah? And they're like, oh, well, really does it all? Yes, you've seen this, you know that this is true. And so now they're not so grossed out by it. And if we're, you know, cleaning out the fridge, they're like, so what's this, Mama? I'm like, soil, you know, then they know where to put it. What's that? Okay, we're gonna eat that tonight. So anyway, I think that the more that we can use the resources that, as we were talking about earlier, have been deemed as waste, it will absolutely benefit our soil. And one thing, I want to say this. One thing I want to say about soil is by having healthy soil and what we need to do to create it, just another link to climate change, is it actually having soil where we use our roof water catchment and hopefully gray water, or even just keep the moisture in the soil, which also comes from composting, right? Like the juices, the rich juices and worm castings and all that you can get from compost as far as moisture, really helps to create, oh shoot, I lost my train of thought. It helps to lower the temperatures on a more local level. So when we're having healthy soil, which is then promoting healthy plants, which is increasing photosynthesis, which is how we're drawing the carbon out of the atmosphere in the first place, we are also creating more moisture in the ground, above the ground, and lowering the microclimates in our neighborhoods, which are really important. And I just want to say a thing around soil and climate change is that what's happening in California right now, we are seeing in our business, is that people, because of fires and because of drought, people are like, oh, I can't water anymore. So I'm going to put stones down and I'm going to rip out my yard and and what's happening is that hardscaping and that getting rid of it should be done. Don't listen to your local people, go to the RCD that you know locally and get recommendations. But healthy soil has the potential to lower our temperatures locally. And if we're in fire prone areas, we want to do that so that when a fire comes through, that heat of the fire is not sucked in by the heat of the microclimates that are in our communities when we're taking out the water, not pumping up the soil, and not planting plant communities.
So you used the phrase RCD, and I wanted to ask Kourtnii about that. RCD, I think, means Resource Conservation District. And California has a system of special districts called Resource and Conservation Districts, which I've heard people from those agencies speak and talk about their desire to bring compost everywhere they can. Kourtnii, are they helping you?
They're awesome, John. So really great success story of this is LA Compost, one of our members, CAC members, and also leading the team in the Los Angeles region for the Community Composting for Green Spaces grant program, was just given access to Griffith Park to build out community composting solutions there, but each one will be longed, manually turned windrows. Some may be mechanically turned if they can get the equipment for it as well. But it will be to recover all of the food waste that's collected at farmers markets, which will be the distributed hubs where people can bring material and drop it off every Sunday. So as they come to get their new food, they bring last week's food, and then LA Compost takes it to Griffith Park. They will be primarily using volunteers to turn that pile. So people who participate in bringing their material to the farmers market can also learn and participate in turning the compost pile at Griffith Park. So it's really going to be using Angelinos to do the work and to bring the material, and working with the Resource Conservation District to do it on public lands and public parks. So this is a very high profile project in an urban area, but Resource Conservation District also have land in kind of semi-urban and more rural counties, and have been pretty supportive in just offering public land and public space to actually process this material. So Santa Cruz actually and being one of those areas. So like San Mateo County and San Jose County. So they're very promising. Marin, they've been very supportive. So yes, yes, and yes.
So you and I both used the phrase food waste. I think we all need to pledge to stop using that phrase.
Say discarded food.
Or you could say surplus food, but you shouldn't say food waste.
Thanks for correcting me. We're actually trying to just get rid of the word waste from our vernacular altogether. And I constantly do word searches to take them out of documents that we have, our website, even in my speaking. So we are trying to just focus on resource recovery, and that's really what we're doing here. We're not really managing waste at all.
Great way to do it.
Mea culpa.
And if I can just amplify something that Anne said that I think is so important, because this rocked my world when I started to get my head around it, which is, changing the mindset around how people think of soil in relationship to climate and in relationship to holding water. There's this idea that we have dry ground because there's a drought, but we may have a drought because there's dry ground.
That's right.
And like just helping contextualize that for folks, realizing that if you have cover crops, or you have, healthy drought tolerant plants, with biomass in your yard, that actually expands the soil. It creates a place for water to stay and be held. It expands the sponge. There's a lot of cultures around the world that don't use the term watershed like we do here. And that mindset in itself is like, how do we get it to go away as fast as possible? We got to shed the water, but water retention and water catchment is how a lot of cultures orient themselves. And the idea that we can create conditions within our soil that are regenerative, that can hold water, we can affect whether we're in a drought or not, and I just want to amplify that message. So Anne, thanks for bringing that up.
I'd like to say something that goes back to a question that John raised about how do you teach people these concepts virtually. One of the things that I've noticed in my own composting, I've been doing it for 50 years, so I've got a lot of experience with composting. And I have out in front of our house, there's a concrete driveway. And next to that driveway, we planted a lantana plant. And also next to that, I made a little compost pile that's about 4 feet high at one point. Well, this lantana has expanded to the point where it's about 10 feet by 10 feet, and it covers a large part of the concrete. Lantana also blooms prolifically like crazy. The little blooms fall down and the leaves fall off a lot too. And so what happens is when the rains come, I've got this compost stand little pile sitting there. It's about a little pyramid, about 4 feet tall. And then next to it is this 10 by 10 lantana plant with about 5 inches of kind of composting lantana flowers and leaves. And when the rains come, both of those, and if they're big rains, you get this saturation. Well, then after the rains, the concrete dries out quickly. But what happens below these two piles, and one of them is a pile and the other one's more a sheet, the lantana sheet develops a bunch of water that keeps coming out for about 5 or 6 days. And it slowly, it looks like a tongue, in terms of its shape. It comes down and of course it's evaporating So eventually it peters out, but before that, it's kind of a triangular shape, and it slowly gets smaller and smaller. Same thing happens with the compost pile. It continues to shed water after the rain event for days afterwards. And I'd like to also say that one of the things that causes that retention is also that you're causing the soil itself to become alive, and those live critters you can't see, but they are themselves little storage things for water, because they have to have water to live. And they also have an exoskeleton, which retards evaporation. So that's another reason why good, healthy soils that are alive retain water and release it slowly.
So I want to turn it over to the group for questions in a moment, but there's a question I wanted to ask all three of our panelists tonight. I'll start with Johnathan, which is, how in the world did you get drawn to this field? And how would you suggest that NCRA members who are interested get involved?
I mean, great question. A meandering path. I sometimes talk to people about what I've done with my life, and they ask me if I'm 100. I've lived a lot of them. But I had the option to pivot into something about 2 years ago. And for me, it was just undeniable. I had to move into climate. I wasn't doing climate work previously. I had some policy background. I'd done some lobbying on behalf of affordable housing subsidy streams. I sat on the board of directors of the Affordable Housing Association of California, Nevada, and Hawaii. I worked, had a land use background, so a lot of different things. And, you know, I live on a sailboat and I love the ocean. And I started finding my way into ocean policy and working with some foundations related to ocean policy and regenerative ocean economies. And I was always the guy at the table just kind of saying, like, don't forget about the ocean, you know, it's super important, you know, it's every second breath you take, you know, but we were looking for regenerative investments or regenerative practices that we could scale. And I just found myself more and more romanced by soil. And I felt like I was cheating on the ocean, but I just kept diving deeper and deeper. And I got hooked up with the folks to Kiss the Ground, and that drew me here. And eventually I just realized that, hey, we can affect change at scale with soil. And so I was drawn in that way. But ultimately, I found it hard to break into climate in some ways. I didn't know, I was afraid of it. I was intimidated. I didn't feel like I had the background. And I eventually just realized, like, hey, whatever skill set people have out there, whatever you're doing today is super valuable in climate. No matter what it is you're doing today, guess what? There's a place for you in climate. We can transition the oil and gas executives a little slower, but there's a place for you in climate. And so for me, it was a matter of realizing, like, no, actually what I have done in innovation and policy actually has a place in climate, that I felt comfortable moving into that space. You know, it's more of me path, how the REAP Center came to be, specifically to, you know, have access to this land, you know, for a fair market rate, but that we could build the center doing all the things we've talked about already.
So Kourtnii, you're obviously building alliances to try to make networks and connect these things. What would you propose to NCRA members that they do to help?
Yeah, great question. I would say education, community education and community awareness is our biggest piece of momentum right now. We have kind of what the Sustainable Economies Law Center likes to refer to as a policy window. That's when enough awareness about the issue with a real viable policy solution can actually get passed through the state of California, and we can do stuff about it. And I think the best way to get success with SB 1383 is to have hands-on public education about how to do resource recovery work. The moment people feel connected to the process, they can come out and practice it, learn from it, participate in Bay Area Green Tours, which we've done a couple times, and they're very interested in this stuff. So community awareness, community education, and just getting involved with those community groups who are on the ground to do this work. It will have a trickle-up effect very much with any larger sized municipal programs that might also come down the pipeline. We'll just get cleaner streams. People will use their green bins better because they'll be connected with how you make soil. So yeah, using really catalyzing the community awareness that we currently have and turning it into large-scale public education.
So, and public education is something you do. How can NCRA members help promote public education?
And just in general, or just through with Bagot and whatever else?
If you were to take a NCRA member and want to plug them into somewhere, where would you plug them?
Ooh, well, I could definitely plug them into, you know, virtual team building with Bay Area Green Tours, or we are trying to put together a farm to school program where they're actually young people leading to the tours for young people, which again, like we talked about, just that connection between them. But also I'd say come and connect with me and my partner, or any of the partners we have in Sustainable Solano, or down with Smart Nerds Education in San Jose, or here in Santa Cruz, and take one of our permaculture design courses. We weave in human ecology and regenerative practices. One of the things, Kourtnii, I loved about, I watched the whole module one, the young woman who gave that, she tied in, I knew exactly what books she had read. It was really holistic and beautiful. And I think that one of what I love about the permaculture design class that we do is we start with the land. So we talk about soil and we get people just totally, their minds blown at how many millions of microbes or billions of microbes there are in the soil. And then you start talking about their gut and they're like, whoa, right? And so it's the having them look outside of themselves first, and then turning the gaze back in, and the cycle that creates with passion and commitment and creating time, you know, experiencing awe. And what all of us are doing, you know, whether it's Johnathan and the classes you want to have in the makerspace there, or Kourtnii with your wonderful soil stewardship program and the community-based work you're doing, or the green tours, Bay Area Green Tours, virtual tours, is everybody right now, especially since COVID, I feel, and I've been an educator for 30 years, they want us to tell them what they can do. And it is so powerful. And soil is one of the most exciting things, because you can really enact change on the soil very quickly. And it can be really satisfying, and something you can do with your kids, or do with your grandma, do with your whole community, that just, it makes people lit up and feel good and feel hopeful, which I think is really the way we're going to get at this climate. Like, the more people that get lit up and enact some change on some level in their lives, the more they're going to be more willing to do policy work and to advocate for community-wide changes.
Well, I hope we've lit people up.
Do you think that this can somehow or other help us get through this weird situation we're in now, where we have a lot of people embracing fascism as a solution to our problems? Can we link this somehow to that, and can we use this somehow or other to divert these people's energies into a more productive thing than fascism? What do you think? Is there any point to this? I know in the hippie period, when I was your age, that's what we were doing. We were doing cultural change, and that was what we were all about. And we thought that it could happen quickly, and in a lot of ways it did. How do you feel about the chance that this can be done quickly?
You want to take it, Johnathan? I saw you unmute yourself.
I mean, I've got thoughts on it without, I mean, again, it's a topic for an entire other meeting, but for me, I'm incredibly inspired by the intersectionality of social, racial, and environmental justice, realizing that these are all a single conversation. These aren't separate topics, and how that ties resources from a biodiversity and carbon and climate standpoint. For me, these things inherently push against fascism, if you will, or other, other klepto practices, by the joining of people in a common cause, where we realize that there's an abundance of nature and we can be a part of our own solutions. So I don't know if that's answering your question or not, but
it does.
Those kind of things get me super excited. I mean, it's why we built a stage at the Reap Center, because, like, of course there's going to be like music, of course there's going to be speakers and community and dancing and all of that stuff. This is that for me.
Okay, well, I want to turn it over to questions from other people that are here. I hope we've lit up people. If anybody on the this call wants to get involved, I'd like Bonnie to put the email addresses for Johnathan, Ann, and Kourtnii up so that they can be contacted directly. And if anybody has questions for Johnathan, Ann, or Kourtnii, please say so.
It looks like Christina Cole had one in the chat. I don't know if you saw that, Kourtnii.
Yes, a question for Kourtnii. Hi, and thank you. Kourtnii, you mentioned running into struggles early on in your work around policy and composting in Alameda County. What sort of struggles specifically did you encounter?
Yeah, great question. It wasn't just me. I just happened to be the one that went to the Sustainable Economies Law Center for help first, but it was happening in San Diego and Los Angeles counties as well simultaneously. And this is I think the issue we've been all trying to avoid in this conversation, but I guess I can't. It's franchise agreements. So this is municipal composting programs that work with an exclusive service provider to handle all solid waste in a community. So we were trying to define ourselves as this, we're not handling solid waste, this is actually resource material, as well as we are, if waste is defined actually when it is put in a bin and set out for collection, that if people bring us their material, then again, it wouldn't be waste and we'd be providing an other service. So it was really carving out a way for Common Compost, which is actually our social cooperative in Alameda County, to be able to operate within a franchise agreement. And this is not something singular to California or to Oakland or to Alameda County, even. It is definitely the trend of waste management across the country. So we figured if we could really work hard to carve out a place for us that was able to operate and to expand in a decentralized network, then we would be able to take this throughout the state and then to take it to other states as we go. So basically the workaround was we provide on-site management of recovering these resources. So was to not move the material at all. And then we didn't have a discussion about a hauling franchise agreement. So we just don't move the material, and that was our way around it. We really work with school systems, with community gardens, with youth development farms, community centers, churches, food banks, for teaching them how they can upcycle and process material themselves using very little labor hours on site, turn it into a resource which they can sell back into the economic mainstream and make revenue that will actually support them doing that work. As well as they get the money for it instead of having to pay out for a corporate service provider to do that work for them. So it was just turning the model on its head that says, why do we have to move it? And if we don't move it, then there aren't actually any city issues. So,
well, that's great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Connie, did you have a question? Looks like you put one on the chat. I can read it. Connie writes, our small backyard in San Francisco is contaminated with decades of lead paint, gas fumes, and more recently ash from fires, which contain more heavy metals. I've read that some plants will absorb contaminants. Any advice about what we can do to mitigate the poisons and return the soil to something more healthy? I'm also curious about the damage that the falling ash is doing to soil all over the state. I'm kind of interested in that too. It kind of contaminated our blackberries last year. So what do we do? What do we do about poisoned soil from fires and other things?
I'm just gonna take a big plug for the worms here. So we make vermicompost. Vermicompost is a very mucousy humus that has the ability to absorb heavy metals and other toxins that are in the soil and release it to the plant as it's needed, instead of poisoning the plants or poisoning the soil. So it's really helpful for soil remediation, as opposed to any other type of compost that you can produce through thermophilic or anaerobic digestion. So the worms have been doing this bioremediation, soil remediation, biomimicry. Johnathan, you used that term earlier, for 4 billion years. And we just think they're the best at making organic fertilizer that's capable of cleaning up poison landscapes.
Can I just put in a plug for that book that I mentioned earlier, Earth Repair by Layla Darwish? It's excellent. It has whole lists of plants, Connie, and what they can be used for if you want to go that route. And I definitely would just ditto what Kourtnii just said. And if you can access any of that from, people get that from you, Kourtnii? Yeah, that's what you said, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Find us in West Oakland.
Great.
Any other questions for our panel?
Yeah, I have one.
Liz.
Hey, hi there. I'm Liz Bortolato. I've got a quick question. Are there actually like soil labs? Is there a way to test your soil and get some idea as to soil health? Like there's a lot of talk about returning lands to healthy soil, but the actual measurement of it, or having any idea if your soil is in good shape or not good shape, or it sort of seems to be a little bit guesswork for the, your average bear. So I was just curious whether you guys know of like technical assistance in this, where they can give you an idea just how well your soil might be doing if you were inclined to test it. So that was one question.
So Liz, we actually have one of the videos up on our playlist, which is on bioassays and a do-it-yourself version of
perfect. Yeah.
soil and how to do that. But there are STA certified compost labs that will like test the quality of compost and also the microbial activity in it as an indicator, if when applied to your soil, how much, kind of life you're putting back into that soil. So with community composting for green spaces, we're going to be taking data on both points, which is the quality of the compost, quality of the soil at the beginning, and then the quality of the soil at the end after applying this compost, to be able to tell that full story. But the soil tests, there's a really good one in the Bay Area Soil Control Labs. If you really want to know just like how much carbon or the nutrients that are already available, or if there are any toxins or heavy metals.
Great, yeah.
You can also just do it yourself if you're just only interested in nutrient analysis with the like little color-coded strips. I'm forgetting the name of them right now, which you can find at any hardware store. So if you just want to know potash, magnesium, potassium, phosphorus, that sort of stuff.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you. I have one other question too, and I wanted to ask you guys generally, and this has to do with bigger wilderness health. I know there's been a lot of carbon studies done with rotating cattle herds, which, is trying to essentially mimic the giant herds that aren't here anymore, and or at least understand what the hell we lost. But my question is, do you guys know if there's actually any experiments, or not experiments, but any real look at elk herds, like healthy wilderness ecosystems that actually have the ranging animals that used to be there, instead of trying to do it with rotating cattle? Like there's a as you guys know, there's an entire story around introducing one species back into Yellowstone that had everything to do with the health of all kinds of systems. And it just seems to me that rotating cattle is, it's an interesting experiment, but it falls really short from trying to reintroduce biodiversity in a complex system. So my question is simply, is there more of a consideration of introducing big herds or studying big herds in wilderness areas in more of a natural setting? And by big herds, I mean of actual native animals that used to be here. I know there's one little helpless herd on Point Reyes area. And that was just, that's a whole other topic. But anyway, that's my question. Are you guys aware of anything like that in California?
I'm not aware of specific. Do either of you know specific research? I just have some resources I could give to you, Liz, that you might really enjoy. I mean, there's the book, The Reindeer Chronicles, totally blanking on the author's name. She's one of my favorites. And she goes into different case studies around, again, interacting with animals, bioremediation and all of that. Does anyone else know? It might be Deeper's house, but it's called The Reindeer Chronicles. I can run in a second. And then there's another book called Water in Plain Sight by Judith Schwartz. And she, I think she was referencing studies. I read this book many years ago, you know, like 6 years ago, and I'm not remembering, but she talks about these beautiful, beautiful research that's done where they were looking and noticing that, you know, when the prairies used to have large herds of bison and whatnot roaming around, that where they would sleep and actually stay, they would create indentations in the soil, and that's where the watering holes would be, and that's where the animals would gather, and then that's where they'd poop and they'd pee and they'd eat and they'd do. And so the study was the ecological impacts of not having them anymore, because then when they were taken away, there weren't those watering holes anymore. There weren't those seasonal places where the animals could gather. So she just has some beautiful, really insightful descriptions of how large animals and herds can be so beneficial, again, to soil health and to water and water cycles. So you might,
biodiversity.
Yeah,
those are great resources. Thank you. Yeah, I jotted them both down. Thank you.
Here's another one. There's some components within this book. If you haven't seen it, you may know Paul Hawken from his former book. But there's some great elements in here, looking at remediation through herd animals and ruminants.
And which book are you talking about right now?
Regeneration.
Oh, is that a pretty new one of his?
It's just out.
Perfect. Yes, very, very interested in that. Okay, thank you guys. I super appreciate it.
Okay, so and actually, the Reindeer Chronicles is written by Judith Schwartz. So same.
Got that.
She's one of my favorites. Go check them out.
Okay.
Can I weigh in before you end this session?
Sure, Marissa.
Not a question, but I just want to tell you, I was asked to be the speaker, and I said, you know, I am not the expert because my job is to just know all the people who are. And Anne was my permaculture teacher, and I was ready to retire. No, and I.
Oh, you froze.
Come back.
And Kourtnii was hosting our very, very last in-person tour with kids. And to answer the question of how do we solve this, my greatest joys come with taking the kids, and I've been doing this a long time, and then seeing them go into these careers, to plant those seeds in those kids and to really get them to go out and take this path. So I'm really pleased and grateful that y'all got a chance to talk about this. And I don't know a thing about what you're doing, Johnathan, and I'm like so excited to find out what you're up to. So I just want to, and also thank Dan Knapp, who's been a big supporter and our first sponsor right when we started in 2008. So this is cool that we got to sit in on this. Thank you.
Well, I'm going to say thank you, Johnathan. Thank you, Anne. Thank you, Kourtnii, for coming and speaking about it. I'm excited. I'm lit. I want to do more with the soil. I want to smell the compost. So I hopefully we get other people to smell the compost. Hopefully we get the elected officials to want to smell the compost. I think that's the biggest challenge, but at least we're making some steps. So every second Tuesday of the month, we do this. If you like the show, tell us. If you don't like the show, tell us. If you have ideas for what we ought to talk about in the future, tell us. Because we want to get to those 300 million Instagram followers like Kim Kardashian, you know, by next year sometime. So thank you very much for joining us. If there's anything anybody else wants to talk about that relates to zero waste advocacy, please speak up. Otherwise, we'll adjourn the meeting.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hearing none, we'll see you next month.
Really great to meet you all as well. Be in touch. Thank you.
I would say compost the empire is my answer to the fascist question.
That would feel good.
Great. That's great. Well, there's got to be an answer, and I hope we find it soon, because it's really pretty scary right now. I mean, when I was just getting started, and as an 18-year-old, you know, I had some wonderful teachers who were Holocaust survivors. And I got very heavily involved in reading what that was all about. And I still read about it all the time. And I think we're sliding into it slowly because of people's hopelessness and the feeling that there's nothing we can do. But you guys are saying, yes, there is something we can do, and we're doing it. And if we do it more, it will do better and we will build a better society. And that's what I think needs to be said more than anything right now. Thank you very much.
You're here.
Thank you.
And we want to be invited to the REAP Center to do this live next time.
Yeah, let's all get together there.
Oh, had I not made that clear? Everybody, please come to the REAP Center.
You have to invite us all.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
bring
We do have open houses every Wednesday from 3 till 7 p.m. We're open on Sundays for people to stop by from 10 a.m. till 7 p.m. But really any day. I mean, I'm 110 hours a week at this thing. We've got people here all the time, volunteers and staff, and it would be nice to show you the place. It's all coming together. It's again, it's a half-mile long, and it's a labor of love. So
is there a free beer line?
I mean, absolutely.
Okay.
100%.
Johnathan, you should add those open house or those open hours to your website, because I work across the street, which is how I got to this talk. And I've walked by a few times and I'm like, what's this? What's this?
Okay.
So I've looked at your website many times, but have yet to volunteer. But someday soon.
Okay, sounds good.
But having those open hours there might attract some of the people that are nearby.
I love it. Thank you for the compliment. Absolutely, 100%.
All right.
Cool.
Okay.
Thank you, everybody.
I'm going to adjourn the call. Thanks, everybody, for joining us.